their father was never involved or tried to get involved once they become world champion and they start making money. So it's dope that my dad been with me from the start. I call my dad actually my shadow because, he don't say really too much. I want to fight somebody who's gonna get me up for the challenge. And they said, what about Tim Tszyu? And I look forward to that. I've been doing that since I was an amateur fighting in other people's countries.
Errol Spence Jr. is no stranger to pressure, pain, or proving people wrong. But this time feels different. After years away from the spotlight, brutal injuries, endless criticism, and one of the toughest losses of his career, the former welterweight king is stepping back into the fire against one of boxing's hungriest and most dangerous contenders, Tim Tszyu. And according to those inside Spence's camp, this isn't just another comeback fight. It's personal. Inside the gym, Derek James sits silently watching film over and over again, studying every movement Tim Tszyu makes. Not the flashy knockouts that flood social media. Not the highlights casual fans obsess over. He's searching for something deeper, a hidden weakness buried underneath Tsyu's relentless pressure and aggression. And eventually, he finds it. A tiny defensive opening during the transition from offense to defense. A split second where Tszyu becomes vulnerable. While the boxing world paints Tim Tszyu as an unstoppable wrecking machine, Derek James believes there's a blueprint to beat him. A rhythm that can be interrupted. A pressure style that can be turned against him. The confidence inside Spence's camp starts growing stronger with every training session. And Errol Spence Jr.? He looks reborn. The atmosphere around camp is completely different from what many expected. There's no circus, no distractions, no loud predictions. Just discipline, focus, and intensity. Derek James calls it the Midwest mindset, staying humble, grinding harder than everyone else, and respecting every opponent like they're the most dangerous fighter alive. This isn't viewed as a tune-up. It's not some easy comeback fight designed to rebuild Spence's confidence after the Crawford loss. They genuinely believe Tszyu is a serious threat. A dangerous young contender entering his prime with momentum, confidence, and knockout power. Every drill in camp reflects that urgency. Spence attacks the heavy bag with violent combinations, firing sharp body shots and crisp jabs with the same speed that once made him one of boxing's most feared champions.
I take care of myself, so I'm able to take care of them and just loving them. And that's why I have training camps at home, so I can spend more time with them. And they have actual memories of me and not just people.
The 3-year layoff that critics mocked doesn't seem to have slowed him down. If anything, it appears to have sharpened him mentally. Those close to camp say the time away allowed Spence to reset physically and emotionally. Years of pressure, title defenses, negotiations, injuries, and personal battles had slowly drained him. The Crawford defeat became the breaking point, but also the wake-up call. The tension between both fighters exploded after Tszyu publicly called Spence trash during interviews. That comment reportedly stayed in Spence's mind throughout camp. It became fuel during brutal conditioning sessions, fuel during exhausting sparring rounds, fuel every time his body screamed for rest. That became crystal clear during the now viral hallway encounter between both fighters. Tszyu extended his hand respectfully before a media event, but Spence refused to shake it. He stared directly through him with cold intensity, making one thing obvious: this fight is no longer business.
Life is about consistency, right? And so, regardless of who or what, one fighter was consistent, the other fighter wasn't, or whatever the case might be.
It's personal warfare. You could feel the tension instantly. Fans and media watching nearby knew something had changed. The respect and politeness were gone. Spence's refusal wasn't a publicity stunt. It was psychological warfare. A warning that he's entering this fight with a completely different mentality. For years, Errol Spence Jr. was known as the calm, composed technician who let his fists do the talking. But now there's a darker edge to him. A veteran who feels doubted, disrespected, and written off. Meanwhile, Tim Tszyu couldn't care less about emotions. The Australian star has built his reputation on pressure, confidence, and fearlessness. He believes this is his moment to officially take over the division by defeating a future Hall of Famer. To many fans, Tszyu represents the new era, the younger, active fighter facing an older champion coming off inactivity and damage. And Tszyu fully embraces that narrative. He's been sharp in camp.
That's what we train for, right? So that's what you gotta take into understanding. I mean,
Training footage shows explosive mitt work, brutal body punching, and relentless conditioning. Every movement looks tight and purposeful. His timing appears elite. His confidence even stronger. A unified champion. An elite technician. A fighter who dominated one of boxing's toughest divisions for years before tragedy and setbacks interrupted his reign. That's why the psychological battle matters so much. Both fighters are trying to prove different things. Tszyu wants to prove he's more than just the son of a legendary fighter. Throughout his career, critics constantly compare him to his father Kostya Tszyu, questioning whether he can truly create his own legacy. Tim insists those comparisons no longer bother him, but deep down the pressure clearly exists. People question whether he's still physically capable of competing at the elite level after the car accident, eye injuries, and brutal Crawford defeat. Some fans even analyze his speech patterns online, claiming they've changed.
Of course, Errol didn't train for that terrorist.
no, I didn't know he did train. I'm not saying he didn't. I'm saying because I can only see. I'm just talking about we're not taking anything from him.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know what happened. And it's not for me to be talking about what happened because I don't know.
Since the accident, others defend him fiercely. Several respected boxing voices, including Shawn Porter, have dismissed those concerns and pointed out that fighters age differently. They compare Spence to veterans like James Toney, who still dominated world-class competition despite visible wear and tear later in their careers. Shawn Porter recently admitted he was shocked by the intensity between both camps during media events. According to Porter, the tension felt deeper than normal promotional hype. The body language, the energy, the reactions, everything suggested genuine animosity brewing beneath the surface. Which is why the game plan appears heavily focused on control and precision. They believe Tsyu's biggest strength, constant pressure, can become his greatest weakness if Spence uses smart footwork, sharp angles, and disciplined combinations. James believes Tszyu thrives when opponents allow him to dictate pace and pressure. But if Spence forces him into uncomfortable exchanges and changes the rhythm consistently, cracks could. Nobody Jake Paul's career may have just hit the most dangerous and emotional turning point anyone could have imagined. What started as another blockbuster crossover boxing event turned into a nightmare under the bright lights in Miami when Anthony Joshua unleashed a terrifying right hand that completely changed the course of Jake Paul's future forever. The social media superstar who once shocked the world by stepping into professional boxing against real fighters was left lying on the canvas after a brutal sixth-round knockout that reportedly shattered his jaw in 2 places and forced emergency surgery immediately after the fight. For years, critics said Jake Paul was protected, manufactured, and carefully matched against opponents who could elevate his fame without exposing his weaknesses. But this fight against Anthony Joshua was different from the very beginning. This wasn't a retired MMA fighter, a basketball player, or a social media attraction standing across the ring. This was a former heavyweight world champion, one of the hardest punchers of this generation, a man who has spent years destroying elite competition on the biggest stages in boxing history. And despite all the doubts surrounding Jake Paul before the fight, the shocking part is that he actually showed courage and moments of real skill early in the contest. Reports claim he even won 2 rounds on one judge's scorecard before the devastating ending arrived. That alone surprised many boxing fans who expected Joshua to end things instantly. Jake moved well early, used his jab, avoided some heavy shots, and tried to frustrate Joshua with movement and clinches. But the deeper the fight went, the more obvious the difference in natural heavyweight power became. Jake later admitted that feeling Joshua's punches with smaller gloves inside a real heavyweight boxing environment was unlike anything he had ever experienced before. He confessed that the mental pressure combined with the physical danger drained his cardio faster than expected. Every exchange carried danger, every mistake felt life-threatening, and eventually that pressure became too much to survive. Then came the punch that changed everything. Joshua's crushing right hand landed perfectly in round 6, sending Jake Paul crashing to the canvas in horrifying fashion. The arena exploded, commentators lost control, and social media instantly erupted with reactions as replays showed the brutal impact over and over again. But the knockout itself was only the beginning of the nightmare. Moments later, it became clear something was seriously wrong with Jake's jaw. Swelling began immediately, doctors rushed into the ring, and reports later confirmed that the damage was severe enough to require multiple titanium plates and screws inserted into his face during emergency surgery. Several teeth reportedly had to be removed because of the impact. Suddenly, this wasn't just another celebrity boxing headline anymore. It became a frightening reminder of how dangerous professional boxing truly is when someone steps into the ring against elite-level heavyweights. Jake Paul later appeared publicly with visible swelling and spoke carefully about the pain, revealing that 4 titanium plates had been inserted into his jaw. Fans who once mocked him suddenly looked at him differently after seeing the damage he absorbed while trying to prove himself in one of the most unforgiving sports on earth. Eddie Hearn, who had warned before the fight that this matchup could end Jake Paul's boxing career, sounded far more serious afterward. Instead of celebrating being correct, Hearn spoke with genuine concern about how difficult it is for fighters to mentally recover from injuries like this. A broken jaw is not simply about waiting for bones to heal. It changes how fighters think inside the ring. The fear of re-injury can stay with them forever. Timing disappears. Confidence fades. Sparring becomes terrifying again because every punch reminds you of the night your face was shattered under arena lights. Hearn explained that fighters often never fully recover psychologically after devastating knockout losses, especially when surgery and facial reconstruction are involved. He stressed that boxing is merciless and doesn't care about popularity or fame. Once the punches start flying, everyone becomes equal inside the ropes. Joe Rogan also reacted strongly to the aftermath, offering one of the most cautionary responses anyone has given regarding Jake Paul's future. Rogan, who has spent decades around fighters and combat sports legends, warned about the long-term neurological damage that can come from repeatedly taking shots from elite heavyweight punchers. He described Joshua's knockout punch as carrying the force of multiple punches combined into one devastating impact. Rogan's concern wasn't only about Jake Paul's broken jaw. It was about what happens internally when someone absorbs that kind of trauma repeatedly over time. He spoke about memory problems, brain damage, mood disorders, and the terrifying consequences many fighters.
You heard Earl, you were trying to be respectful as you were staying the entire time, and then he came at you the way he came at you. How do you react to that?
Look, I've been brought up with humility and respect, you know, but I guess it doesn't work on both sides. That's fine, I see how it is. It's all good.
As you stated up there as well, you know, he brought up your father, that you're not your father's dad, and you said it yourself. It's been said in every single fight. Is that still something that kind of bothers you, that people want to bring that up?
No, it doesn't bother me. It just shows their insecurity. You know, that's all right. You know, that's fine. What my father's done in his career, it's...
face long after the cheers disappear. Rogan's message was simple but powerful. Jake Paul has other opportunities in life. He has wealth, fame, businesses, and influence outside combat sports. Continuing to absorb punishment against world-class heavyweights may not be worth the risk. And that perspective sparked a huge debate across the combat sports community because for the first time, many fans stopped treating Jake Paul like a joke and started viewing him as someone genuinely risking his life chasing legitimacy in boxing. The emotional side of this story became even more intense when clips surfaced of Jake joking about retirement while visibly injured and exhausted. Some moments sounded humorous, others sounded deeply serious. He talked about the constant punishment, the endless grind of training camps, and how mentally draining boxing had become. Reports then began circulating that Jake Paul was genuinely considering retirement.
I hope he is. When he fought Terence Crawford, I felt like he looked a bit dizzy, you know? So I don't know. So hopefully he's all right. Hopefully he's at his peak. That's what I expect.
And you say that
Tez the feeling that the sport is turning its back on the very people who kept it alive during difficult years. And that emotional divide is becoming more obvious every season. Some fans fully embrace NASCAR's evolution and believe street races are necessary for growth. Others feel the sport is losing its soul in pursuit of television ratings and corporate partnerships. What makes this debate so complicated is that both sides actually have valid arguments. Traditional tracks carry history and authenticity that can never truly be replaced. But at the same time, NASCAR cannot survive purely on nostalgia forever. The sport desperately needs new fans, new markets, and younger audiences to remain financially strong in the future. The Chicago Street Race managed to accomplish something very few NASCAR events can do. It created mainstream buzz outside the core racing community. That matters.
This weekend, bruh, it's not a lot of times that I do what I do, and I'm like, well, I can't say it ain't a lot of times, but because I know how good I am, but there's times where I'm like, even I blow myself away. And I mean, the stuff that I did with these guys this weekend, I blew myself away. I'm still talking about it to my lady and everything. I'm still hyped up about it. So you guys be looking out for those interviews. Shout out to Fox Australia, man. They're gonna bless us. They're gonna put together the finished product, and they're gonna give it to us so that we can put it on our platform, which to me is amazing. I'm super grateful for them. That fight takes place July 25th over here, 26th over there. And we've been talking about this fight. I think we pretty much knew that it was coming. But now that it's here, you got a chance to interview those guys the other day, or at least be in the crowd of people interviewing them. Did you hear anything, see anything that, make you feel any sort of way? You feel any sort of way at this point?
Enormously in modern sports business. The visuals alone were powerful. Seeing stock cars flying through downtown Chicago with the skyline in the background gave NASCAR a completely different image compared to its usual presentation. For casual viewers, it felt fresh and exciting. For longtime fans, however, it also felt unfamiliar and even uncomfortable. That tension perfectly captures NASCAR's current identity crisis. The sport is trying to balance two completely different worlds at the same time. One world values history, tradition, and classic oval racing above everything else. The other values spectacle, expansion, and entertainment-driven innovation. NASCAR is attempting to serve both audiences simultaneously, but the big question is whether that balancing act is actually sustainable long-term. Because eventually, hard decisions...
It's not an easy thing to talk about. I'm concerned and skeptical of Spence heading into this fight. I think something about his speech, and people say he has he's always had that Texas drawl. After the car accident, he had to get different teeth put in. And he said that affected his speech too. And I'm reminded of fighters like James Toney, who even when their speech wasn't quite the same at cruiserweight that it was at middleweight or super middleweight, he was still whipping ass and still beating Vasily Girov and knocking out Evander Holyfield. But you notice the difference in his speech pattern. And with Spence, that's something I picked up on. Other people that I talk to don't seem to pick up on it the way I do. They say, hey, he's Spence. He's always talk chill and everything. I remember a segment of the audience thinking that on Fight Night against Terrence Crawford.
Decisions have to be made. Every time NASCAR adds an outreach event in a major city, another traditional venue potentially loses its place. Every time television partners demand a new marquee spectacle, fans worry another piece of NASCAR's identity is disappearing. And the concern isn't just theoretical anymore. Tracks that once seemed untouchable have already vanished from the schedule before. That's why fans are reacting so emotionally to the Chicago street race rumors. This isn't simply about Chicago. It represents the broader direction NASCAR is heading toward. A future built around major media events, urban outreach, and entertainment-first presentation. The financial logic behind that strategy is understandable. If one controversial event helps secure billion-dollar TV contracts and keeps NASCAR financially stable for the next decade, executives may view the investment as completely worthwhile despite short-term losses. But critics argue there is...
It ain't a tune-up, but it's, you know what I'm saying? It's a good little fight for him. Man been out 3 years. Tim Tszyu been active. Former world champion. He ain't going to get nobody we don't know. I can't do nothing but salute and take my hat off for him and see how he go to work. I think he gonna be fine. He looked like he's in good shape. He ain't look all out of shape. He looked like, he looked good. He looked mentally all there. And I mean, shit, them little 3 years, like I said, I told him as soon as it happened, I said, okay, he had other stuff going on, other stuff going on. That was a 5-year accumulation, a lot of stuff he did going through the rigmaroles with Bud, trying to figure out if they was gonna fight and building up his reputation and all this stuff. That was a lot. He been doing this since 2012. That was a lot, so 3 years.
The hidden danger in relying too heavily on spectacle. If NASCAR focuses too much on attracting casual viewers while slowly pushing away its core fan base, the sport risks becoming financially successful but culturally hollow. Rich in money, but poor in identity. That's the nightmare scenario many longtime fans fear. And honestly, it's not hard to understand why emotions are running so high. NASCAR's leadership is effectively attempting one of the biggest balancing acts in modern sports. They are trying to respect the sport's past while aggressively chasing its future at the exact same time. They want traditional short tracks and historic venues to remain part of the schedule, but they also want races that appeal to global audiences and streaming platforms. They want authenticity and mainstream spectacle simultaneously. The challenge is that those goals sometimes directly conflict with one.
Contact with life too. It ain't just about us and what we want to do and what we want to see. He got a life. He in there, so he did right, and I'm glad to see him come back.
Did you see there's like a viral clip of him, Tim Tszyu trying to shake his hand, and he's like, nah, I'm not shaking your hand. I've been hearing you talking about you're gonna retire me and all that. Did you see the clip?
No, I didn't see that. When they was in the hallway?
Yeah.
Don't pull it up, Neil. It's good. They was in the hallway?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, that's what Tim Tszyu supposed to say. So I don't understand why everybody getting upset by stuff they supposed to say. That's what you're supposed to say. You my, but it's still, we still, you my peer, you still a fellow fighter, so.
On another. The return of the Chicago Street Race in 2027 could ultimately become one of the defining moments in NASCAR's modern history. If successful, it may prove that the sport can evolve without abandoning its roots entirely. It could become a blueprint for future outreach events in major cities around the world. But if handled poorly, it could deepen divisions within the fanbase and accelerate fears that NASCAR is drifting too far away from the identity that made people fall in love with the sport in the first place. And that is why this story matters so much more than a simple race announcement. The Chicago Street Race has become symbolic of NASCAR's future itself. It represents the tension between heritage and innovation, between loyal traditional fans and new mainstream audiences, between authenticity and spectacle. NASCAR.
All right, use your common sense. The Tim is a PBC guy in the States. These guys are PBC guys. You look for the correct possible matchup at this stage in their careers. It starts to make sense, so, you don't
see it.
How do I see it? I don't know. I mean, Spence hasn't fought in decades, feels like, even Charlo. So I don't know. How do you know what's left out of those guys mentally, physically? You don't know, Obviously with Tim, there's a lot of question marks. He's just come back with a win, but at least Tim is trying to stay busy and active. With those guys, it's hard to say. You haven't seen them. You don't know how their training's going, if their training is even going, and how they are mentally and physically at this point in their life and their careers.
Tim's team copped a lot of criticism, his old team, should I say, about walking him into people like Fundora on short notice, or Murtazalayev unknown, or taking a rehydration clause on the IBF, and things like that.
Errol Spence Jr. is no stranger to pressure, pain, or proving people wrong. But this time feels different. After years away from the spotlight, brutal injuries, endless criticism, and one of the toughest losses of his career, the former welterweight king is stepping back into the fire against one of boxing's hungriest and most dangerous contenders, Tim Tszyu. And according to those inside Spence's camp, this isn't just another comeback fight. It's personal. Inside the gym, Derek James sits silently watching film over and over again, studying every movement Tim Tszyu makes. Not the flashy knockouts that flood social media. Not the highlights casual fans obsess over. He's searching for something deeper, a hidden weakness buried underneath Tsyu's relentless pressure and aggression. And eventually,
So, I mean, yes, you speak about him sitting on, but is it not just rewriting the books again?
With Spence, you don't know what's left. He's not looked very good, so it might be one of those cases where you're catching him at the right time. But then again, Spence may feel that about Tszyu as well, right?
Yeah.
You might catch him at the right time. It's one of those things where the matchup makes sense because both guys might be catching one another at the right time, but you're going to get a winner out of the fight, and the winner can, move on to possibly a title fight, As far as the criticism for Tim and his team, there's going to be a lot of opinions, but the person that has skated the most criticism, that deserves the most criticism, is the ringside doctor that night.
Finds it. A tiny defensive opening during the transition from offense to defense. A split second where Tszyu becomes vulnerable. While the boxing world paints Tim Tszyu as an unstoppable wrecking machine, Derek James believes there's a blueprint to beat him. A rhythm that can be interrupted. A pressure style that can be turned against him. The confidence inside Spence's camp starts growing stronger with every training session. And Errol Spence Jr.? He looks reborn. The atmosphere around camp is completely different from what many expected. There's no circus, no distractions, No loud predictions. Just discipline, focus, and intensity. Derek James calls it the Midwest mindset, staying humble, grinding harder than everyone else, and respecting every opponent like they're the most dangerous fighter alive. This isn't viewed as a tune-up. It's not some easy comeback fight designed to rebuild Spence's confidence after the Crawford loss. They genuinely believed Tszyu is a serious threat. A dangerous young contender entering his prime with momentum, confidence, and knockout power. Every drill in camp reflects that urgency. Spence attacks the heavy bag with violent combinations, firing sharp body shots and crisp jabs with the same speed that once made him one of boxing's most feared champions. The 3-year layoff that critics mocked doesn't seem to have slowed him down. If anything, it appears to have sharpened him mentally. Those close to camp say the time away allowed Spence to reset physically and emotionally. Years of pressure, title defenses, negotiations, injuries, and personal battles had slowly drained him. The Crawford defeat became the breaking point, but also the wake-up call. The tension between both fighters exploded after Tszyu publicly called Spence trash during interviews. That comment reportedly stayed in Spence's mind throughout camp. It became fuel during brutal conditioning sessions, fuel during exhausting sparring rounds, fuel every time his body screamed for rest. That became crystal clear during the now viral hallway encounter between both fighters. Tszyu extended his hand respectfully before a media event, but Spence refused to shake it. He stared directly through him with cold intensity, making one thing obvious: this fight is no longer business. It's personal warfare. You could feel the tension instantly. Fans and media watching nearby knew something had changed. The respect and politeness were gone. Spence's refusal wasn't a publicity stunt. It was psychological warfare. A warning that he's entering this fight with a completely different mentality. For years, Errol Spence Jr. was known as the calm, composed technician who let his fists do the talking. But now there's a darker edge to him. A veteran who feels doubted, disrespected, and written off. Meanwhile, Tim Tszyu couldn't care less about emotions. The Australian star has built his reputation on pressure, confidence, and fearlessness. He believes this is his moment to officially take over the division by defeating a future Hall of Famer. To many fans, Tszyu represents the new era, the younger, active fighter facing an older champion coming off inactivity and damage. And Tszyu fully embraces that narrative. He's been sharp in camp. Training footage shows explosive mitt work, brutal body punching, and relentless conditioning. Every movement looks tight and purposeful. His timing appears elite. His confidence even stronger. A unified champion. An elite technician. A fighter who dominated one of boxing's toughest divisions for years before tragedy and setbacks interrupted his reign. That's why the psychological battle matters so much. Both fighters are trying to prove different things. Tszyu wants to prove he's more than just the son of a legendary fighter. Throughout his career, critics constantly compare him to his father Kostya Tszyu, questioning whether he can truly create his own legacy. Tim insists those comparisons no longer bother him, but deep down the pressure clearly exists. People question whether he's still physically capable of competing